Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. Today, I'd like to discuss how and why the president and congressional Republicans are a threat to women. Dorothy Samuels is a senior fellow at NYU Law School's Brennan Center and has written about women's equality and reproductive rights many times during her 30 years on the New York Times editorial board. She's my guest today. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me.
So what is happening with these people, and why are Republicans so opposed to women? It's not only women's rights. I mean, you know, in the recent things, this Kamala Harris, she talks too fast, much like a prosecutor, and they interrupt and,
I think it's
act
partly
like a woman.
he's a woman, and perhaps for some lawmakers, not worth listening to, too strong. But I
don't think they think that she's not worth listening to.
They fear that she would be worth listening to and don't want to hear what she has to say.
Or she's unladylike.
Well,
because I think they're so old-fashioned.
But I think essentially, you know, certainly in Washington and in more state houses across the country since January, Republicans, very conservative Republicans, have won positions of power and control of the legislative agenda, and this, unfortunately, hurting women, setting back their rights and their freedom, and even having an agenda that hurts their health is part of their agenda. There's no other way to describe, for example, rolling back, reinstating the global gag rule, this international rule that limits spending, foreign aid spending, to groups because they even talk about abortion. Even though no U.S. money is being spent on abortion. And that decision by Trump was actually extraordinary.
And that was an executive order or something.
That's right. You could do it by executive order. Every Democrat since Reagan has lifted the order, and every Republican has reinstated it. And the difference with Trump, as with so many things, is he didn't just reinstate it, he just supersized it. He enlarged it. So something like 5 times as much money being spent on global health is now going to be covered by this atrocious rule. And what we know from the past, when the rule on a much limited scale was in place, we know that many, many, many thousands of women will die. Not just that they'll be ill or their lives will be worse. They will die. A major issue across the globe
Does it
is maternal death.
Extend to contraceptives?
Well, there won't be access. Women all across the globe want to control their lives. You know, as we are reminded by what's been going on since January with the Trump administration, this isn't really just about abortion. It's about women's ability to determine their own destiny, and we're back with a big fight about contraception. And so even before we get to what passage of the Republicans' health plan would do, which is an ongoing battle as we sit here, there's already been a draft that was released a couple of weeks ago about what the Trump administration's plan to roll back the contraception so-called mandate, which allows women, very successful program in cutting down unwanted, unplanned births, and probably in cutting back the abortion rate and numbers. The research is still not definitive, but that it shows. I mean, it's ironic. It actually cuts abortion when the whole purpose is supposedly to aim at abortion. And you have to understand that on the furthermost wing of the right, the religious right, that seems to control a lot of the agenda here, there's a belief, not scientific and contradicted by medical professions, that some of the most effective long-acting contraceptives are actually abortifacients. And so they believe a lot of the contraceptives are actually, they cause abortions, which they don't by the regular definition. But in any case, in that case, the hatred of contraception is so great, if you look at these proposed rules, that this administration is willing to dismantle religious liberty in the country as it's been understood since the founding. That is, the key point being your right to practice religion stops when you impose it on others. It's sort of it's the rule that your mother taught you when you were a kid. You know, your right, you know, your right to have a fight with someone else stops when your fist reaches the other guy's nose.
It goes beyond the Hobby Lobby.
Oh, this goes, yes.
Well,
it goes beyond Hobby Lobby in several ways. First of all, the Hobby Lobby decision, which granted a what's called an accommodation, so it wasn't an exemption, to certain relatively, in theory, small number of family-owned or small corporations where the owners controlled the company and had religious beliefs. The court allowed an accommodation for that, and was not a great decision as far as I'm concerned. But at least in the decision itself, there was one of the bases was, well, the women who work for this company is going to get the benefit anyway. So they will not be hurt. You could, you know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg had a good argument about why they would be hurt and it wasn't a good idea. But at least the premise in theory was there's a way government can do this to convey the benefit and also grant the accommodation. The rule the Trump people have proposed and are working on probably issuing soon is not only it would be any company, private or public, not just for a religious reason, but for a, quote, moral reason, so an expansion there as well, but to any act at all, to just, it would grant this giant hole that is an exception, not an accommodation. It would be, you just don't have to obey the law. Now that's consistent with the anti-government theme of the administration.
So what is that? That means that insurance companies don't have to cover it? Is that what it is?
Well, that would mean their insurance plans don't have to cover anything that they choose. And think of that being played out for gay people. It was a rule that was rejected, you know, in the civil rights days as what should happen after the Civil Rights Act. There are people who tried to get religious exemptions and even accommodations were ruled out. But on top of that, as Justice Scalia, of all people, pointed out many years ago in a religious liberty case, if you just allow everybody even to have accommodations just on religious bases where the religion isn't particularly targeted, where it would hurt, especially where it would hurt other people, it's a formula for chaos. You can't run a government. You can't have effective programs. And you also can't have religious liberty, because what it means is that employers, for their own sort of willy-nilly reasons, can just decide we're not going to convey benefits because our religious and moral beliefs trump yours or trump your need. And by the way, that's the other thing. What don't they get? One of the things that that Republicans who are in power now seem not to get is that these are very important benefits. So they keep dismissing the importance of contraception, which gets us to the equality issue here, really, because even conservative Supreme Courts, this Supreme Court, absent Gorsuch, but with Scalia, just a year ago, reaffirmed the belief, the factual statement that being able to control the timing and number of children is essential for women's equality, for their functioning in the workplace. And there are studies that show that. And so when you're opposed to this stuff, when you're getting away, by definition, you are impeding women's equality.
At the same time, well, they're drafting, the Senate's drafting its version of the health bill, right?
Yes.
And we know in the Republican version that women's rights or women's coverage,
well, first of all, every
decimated.
time, yes, exactly. And every time you cut, and this is going on also in budget proposals, every time you cut the safety net, you hurt women, particularly poor women, disproportionately. And a lot of that is going on both with health benefits and also insurance benefits, a whole range of things. Yes, if the draft they're talking about, I mean, we're already talking when 23 million folks are going to be kicked off the rolls, when you have maternity coverage on the cutting block, stuff like that, you know women are going to be in trouble.
Is the contraceptive, that's not considered a pharmaceutical medication or anything, is it? I mean, equate contraceptives with Viagra.
Well, Viagra's covered. I mean, if
Yeah.
that's what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Yeah, Viagra's covered.
Why is it covered? Because of the, how is it covered? It's a medication?
Well, it's a necessary health benefit, whereas somehow contraception for women, not so necessary, although Obamacare remedied that. And again, it's one of these programs that has been tremendously successful in terms of, without overwhelming the budget, has given women this tremendous benefit that has really helped women in terms of
But this is what
family planning. We used to think family planning
was a
not
good
so
thing.
long more than that. It was bipartisan.
Oh, totally. I remember.
And so this, I think it's one more sign of the, unfortunately, the Republican Party being disproportionately controlled by a very small segment of America, which is this very right-wing, religious-oriented, evangelical groups, and that's having real effect. And there are things that, one of the frustrating things when you cover this stuff, or you're looking at it in terms of, well, you want there to be political accountability. So when people say in 2018 are making a judgment of the polls, are these folks we want to keep in office? You want there to be more attention at some of these things that a majority of voters oppose. A majority of voters don't want Planned Parenthood clinics closed because they're no longer receiving.
And that's part of the House plan.
Well, it's part of the House plan, and there's, I suspect,
Great belief it's going to be part of the Senate plan.
Well, there are people now in the Senate on the Republican side, they will not approve any health bill unless it includes it, and then you have a handful of Republicans, God bless them, who won't approve it if it includes Planned Parenthood. And then there is, again, there are all the themes of the Trump administration, that is disdain for government, disdain for women, and disdain for facts, all play out in this area of how women are treated in their policies. And here, the myth is, you don't need contraception. Contraception is easily affordable. Well, it's not. The more effective, longer lasting methods cost quite a bit of money that a lot of women cannot afford. But the notion that none of this hurts women, and how even certain forms of contraception act, it's all big lie stuff that's being trotted out. And ultimately, when we look at policies, it's all of our tendencies is to put everything in a box. We're having a separate fight now over, for example, Legal Services Corporation. Trump in his 2018 proposed budget wants to do away with the ability of poor people to get any help with their civil legal problems.
Is he taking all the money out of that?
Oh yeah, this has been an ongoing fight going back at least till since Reagan. We're going back to a lot of old themes here. These are attacks on democracy. When you attack the ability of any people, whether it's on voting rights or on participation in the court system, you're talking about the structure of democracy. When you talk about changes to the contraception mandate that basically put a religious twist on it, so religious liberty, so people can impose their religious and moral beliefs on others, causing them to lose very valuable benefits that can hurt their health. We're talking about an attack on democracy. Is there anything more basic to democracy than the First Amendment? When we have a global gag rule that permits, that disallows people in the poorest countries in the world that have a horrible problem with maternal deaths from unsafe abortions, and HIV, and HIV, and we say our people cannot speak out, right? The people who get money, they cannot speak out in the debates about how you solve those problems, how you prevent women from dying. That's a huge free speech violation.
And when you cut the Medicaid?
Yes.
And throw what, million people off the rolls, that they don't get any additional health care?
Well, that's the proposal.
Yeah.
And, but there are other things as well. I mean, things, so one of my complaints, you know, continuing to look at these issues over the years is with everything going on in Washington now, right, and all the strange doings and outrages, it's hard to get any traction for anyone because even, let's say, the press, it's doing their best to cover it. They have to move on to the next outrage the next day. So it's hard to get traction and attention. And then there are other things that just fly under the radar. I would bet most people, you know, who even know that Planned Parenthood is under attack, under the lie from the Trump administration that we could just take up the slack if we do away with reimbursements for Planned Parenthood, then these other federal clinics will take up the slack, even though those clinics say themselves, no, we can't do it. And a lot of us don't even do family planning work or contraceptive work. No way we can do it, just factually. But it hardly got any coverage when the president undid Obama's protections for fair pay in the federal workforce. That was amazing. And it was the most unthreatening kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think of what he rolled back a rule that employers have to be more transparent about their pay rate, because women don't know if they're
being underpaid,
you know, unless they know what the figures are, which was a big problem in the Lilly Ledbetter case. It still hasn't been remedied by Congress because there's been Republican objection. And now, but most people don't even know that, to keep track of the list. But I'm also, again, it's really, I think, important to the extent, folks, there is a tendency to say, well, that's women's issues. What else? You know, what about the economy? What about this? But
and housing.
And what? Yeah, but all of this is part of the same thing. It's an attack on government. It's trying to dismantle protections that protect all of us and protect our democracy. What is democracy? It's equality. It's participation in society.
It doesn't recognize equality.
That's right.
It doesn't, and it's from top down, from the tax proposals, and we know that they always want to cut taxes of the top people, right?
Well, it's an odd recognition of equality. It's the old French thing, you know, we could all sleep under the bridge together. Yeah. Both the rich and the poor.
But it is totally an opposite of what we believe in.
Well, there is that, yeah.
Now, you've been through many movements.
Yeah, well.
With great passion.
Yes. Why
are we stymied with this one?
Well, I don't know. First of all, you know, first of all, the jury's still out. I mean, I've been actually sort of amazed at the degree, certainly in the beginning, unfortunately after the election, because the voter turnout was disgracefully low, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people are very unhappy, and there is a sense that democracy is being hurt, and rights are being hurt, and people are being hurt. How you sustain it is a really big question.
There's also there is an optimistic part of it. I mean, look at the Democrats in Atlanta. They're really working hard in this election.
Well, that's what I mean. It's broad. There's certainly a lot more people who are becoming activists. It does worry you. Can you sustain it, and can you bring it into the political system? And
that's the big challenge.
Well,
right?
that is. There are some people who would say to you and I,
to you and me.
Sorry, God, that's embarrassing. That's really the only challenge. That is who will control the strings of government. It is astonishing. I was disappointed, to say the least, when Trump, and very worried and concerned when Trump was elected. But I have to say, I've been shocked by how he's filled his cabinet with people who are, utterly the opposite. These are all cabinet departments that were formed to help people, and they're filled now with people who don't believe in the mission, including, don't believe in the mission of protecting us from the earth burning up. I mean, that's extraordinary and utterly dangerous. So we have a lot more concern. We have a lot more people who are trying to organize and do things to help it, but ultimately, the jury's out. Will it stop at the polls? And will it stop at the polls? And how much damage will be done before? Because one of the things, for example, one of the things on Trump's agenda, has to do with our civic life. Are we going to do away with the arts organizations and the humanities? Are we going to do away with the organizations that go back to the Peace Corps and John F. Kennedy and AmeriCorps that so many young people especially like to serve on, that have to do with serving your country? And those right now are completely, it's zeroed out in the Trump budget. So how much damage will be done? Because these institutions will be very hard, if not impossible today, to recreate. So there is going to be a lot of damage, whatever happens in the interim.
What's so interesting is he has a very low rating of people satisfied with what he does. The Congress has practically no rating, right? But how does they persist?
I know.
That's what's so interesting about it. And what's happened to reasonable Republicans? Did they age out?
That's a whole other subject, because you're right. We live in New York. Republicans in New York, the Rockefellers.
They used to be. We have this guy at State who's not so great.
Well, but I have to say they were, people don't remember the history.
Yeah.
They were some of the greatest supporters of civil rights of Dr. King.
Yeah.
Where did that go? To pass the Civil Rights Act, we had to rely on Everett Dirksen, the Republican leader in the Senate, to round up the votes. Our problems were the Southern Democrats. So, things change over time. This is something, I think, on a level certainly I've never seen in my lifetime, in terms of, I believe, the threat to the foundations of liberty, the foundations of democracy. And you wonder, well, how many poor women are going to die? How many poor kids are going to be hurt in the interim? And it's every area, is getting a look for dismantling.
It's funny. I feel that residents of New York State are at a great disadvantage because we don't have it right in front of us. We usually elect pretty liberal or sane people. We have a governor who says he's going to make up for the losses.
Well, that's true, but we still haven't passed sufficient protection. Well, we haven't passed sufficient protections in New York State so that if the fundamental right to abortion disappears because we've changed members of the Supreme Court, or it has in practice because of actions by the government, by the administration or the Congress, we don't have laws in place right now, even though we've had Democratic governors who supposedly believe in having those protections. They're not in place now to protect us. And meanwhile, more and more states keep passing more and more regulations limiting rights for women in a way that really hurts their lives in concrete ways. And their hope is that it will go to a new Supreme Court. And a lot of our hope, so far, the judiciary has held in doing their job, say, on the action on immigration, for example, that are unconstitutional. As the membership changes, will that continue? All big ifs. All big ifs.
And as judges get appointed in local, federal judges.
Well, the nominees so far are a rather right-wing ideological lot. It doesn't give you real confidence about how the court, all the vacancies are going to be filled. It's as I said, it's a scary time. Some of the things we've seen before, it's more so.
Do you think we'll eventually get it? Eventually, generations ahead will change it all?
Well, I hope we're not talking generations. I'm hoping.
We're too impatient, right?
Well, I'm hoping
we need to be impatient.
I'm hoping that the Republican Party isn't always going to be captive of a certain very radical right group of people.
Well, that's why I mentioned the Kamala Harris thing, because here you had Orrin Hatch, who we know is conservative, but he's usually smart, I'd have thought. And the other guy, what's his name?
Well, other people who you trusted to be sort of this word bipartisan, you know, can't be trusted as reliably. And remember, with Orrin Hatch, a lot of his bipartisanship came when Ted Kennedy was around, and they were very close friends, and they worked together.
Yeah. And you have a vice president who won't go sit down to have a drink or eat with a woman unless he's with his wife. Well, what does that say to us?
He's of a different, he has a different cultural outlook, but I look more at the concrete record, and he was a very right-wing, very anti-woman governor and member of the House. His record is not good on these issues. So
we have a few seconds. What are your final words?
My final words is everybody needs to keep involved, everyone needs to keep up on things, and to do the work of democracy, which is to speak out and to organize when you see something that's wrong.
Right. Thank you, Dorothy Samuels.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. We at CUNY TV always like to hear from our viewers. So if you have any subjects you'd like to explore or people you'd like to hear, please let us know. Write to us at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or go to our website, cuny.tv, and click on Contact Us. We look forward to hearing from you.